Hello, podcast listeners. It's Jenna, your host for the Faces of Grand Prairie podcast. Well, we're kind of in an interesting time, aren't we? I'm working on day 245 of the quarantine. Just kidding, kind of. Feels like that long. But at least the last couple of days have been sunny, so we've been able to get out and go for walks and enjoy ourselves for a bit. This whole situation slowed down my interviews, so I thought that I would put out a best of episode with excerpts from all my guests so far. I wanted everybody to know something from my heart, you guys. We're going to get through this. I promise that this isn't going to last forever, and we'll be bouncing back sooner than you think. I am so sorry if this coronavirus has led to illness or loss for you or your family, the temporary loss of your livelihood, if you're losing money every day in your business, if it's caused you stress and anxiety by being home. I just wanted you all to know that every loss in this entire situation matters, and it's not fair for anybody right now. I want to thank all the medical professionals, the grocery store employees, the educators, the emergency personnel, our elected officials, the truckers, and all the other men and women who are still having to go to work to make this world function right now despite all the madness. It really is my true belief that we're going to get through this quicker than we all think that we will, and we'll be back on our feet stronger than ever. You just wait. There's going to be some major celebrations and partyings going on when we get out of this. In the meantime, take a listen to some of my favorite parts of the episodes we've recorded so far, and you can go back and listen to any of them if you'd like to hear them in their entirety. Enjoy! From my episode with Mayor Ron Jensen.
Because I've known you for a while, and because you've always shown up, you've always shown up to anything I've ever asked you to do. Because we did National Night Out, you always come to do those things. Anytime I ever say yes, if you can, you always do. And I'm not the only person that's noticed that about you. And so I'm curious, do you have a hard time fitting everything in?
I do sometimes.
Yeah.
I can't live without my with Gloria Colvin at City Hall. She takes care of calendaring things for me,
right.
But I tell her to calendar things.
Right.
She doesn't calendar anything without me approving it.
It's not like you wake up and you don't know what you're doing that day.
Right. And some people don't realize. I get emails that say, I don't know if you'll read this or not. I may get a staffer respond. I read all my own emails. I respond to all my own emails. Mm-hmm. And I calendar things out weeks ahead if I can. And
I can testify to that because when I put I put an email out to you and a few other people, and you were the first one to respond to me when I said, I have this idea, I think we want to do this. You immediately said, sure. And you were the first person to say that. And it wasn't your assistant, it was you.
I do not like my iPhone to have red dots on it.
So you don't like all the notifications?
No, I'll sit by somebody. I sit somebody. I'm on the RTC, Regional Transportation Council, with 40 mayors, judges, people from all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. One of the mayors, I won't tell you who is, sitting next to me. I looked at his one time. He had 394 emails.
Oh, no.
I said, how do you do that? He says, I never catch up. Well, I keep mine caught up. I mean, I'll sit in the car for 15 minutes. When I go to Starbucks, I will clear out every one of my emails I got overnight while I'm at Starbucks. Every one of them, I'll clear them out. Send them to somebody, answer them, do what I have to do with them. Put them in a file to do later. I have a file.
Yeah.
You have to have some type of system.
Absolutely.
I'll put it in a file to hold, but text messages, I clear those out. All of those, I clear out.
You don't want to look at my phone.
I don't.
It's bad. Especially when you're on like a parent, group, and it's like group text.
Oh, take me off this group.
Exactly.
And Facebook, the message. My gosh, I've opted out of so many of those. Why am I on this?
I know. I'm like,
they add you, and then you're just getting these random stuff, and I don't even know what they're talking about. So I dropped the group.
That's exactly. I know, and I'm like, I don't want to know any of this. This has nothing to do with me. But I mean,
yeah, nothing to do with me.
From my episode with Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce President Michelle Madden.
So a couple of personal questions, because I'm very interested. You were a business owner, really as a realtor. That's what you are as a business owner. before you became the president. Mm-hmm. So, like, what are some of the business owner lessons that you learned while you were running your business?
Oh my gosh. Really keep a tight handle on your finances, especially in the world of real estate, but it could apply to anybody. You know, you start picking stuff up, and between that and making sure you track your miles, if you're putting miles on your car, you got to do all those things. You have to be really responsible about that. Making wise decisions on your marketing choices too.
Oh yeah.
I made a big investment, and we currently now are doing something great at the chamber that I wish I'd had the opportunity of back then. I paid for time on a movie screen at one of our major movie theaters down. Yeah,
really?
I had a commercial that ran for a year on the screen, and it was quite an investment, but I thought, you know what, go big or go home.
Right.
But now at the chamber, we are also offering a slot on a digital billboard for a fraction of the cost that I spent on that movie theater thing.
Right.
So we're bringing opportunity to members who would not be able to get on a billboard otherwise.
Right.
So
right.
Those are the things. I mean, really managing your money, probably managing my time a little bit better. But it's hard in the world of real estate, just in general. You know, you're in your car a lot, and there's not a lot you can do.
But you were very involved, even as a business owner. Like, you were involved in you were involved in Rotary, you were involved in all that stuff. So, like, that has helped you tremendously, I would imagine, doing what you do now.
Yeah, and really, honestly, maybe not so much from building my business, but part of my business is being able to communicate. And I think that giving yourself exposure and as many opportunities as you can to publicly speak, whether it's really with 3 people or 30 people.
Oh my goodness, yes.
It makes it so much better and makes situations even like this right here with you so much easier. And I consider public speaking now, not that I'm great at it, but I consider it more of a challenge and not a fear.
From my episode with Mayor Pro Tem and City Councilman Jeff Copeland.
I was at just the Grand Prairie Women's Club because my mom, and you know my mom, and she raised me to be service oriented my whole life and to be involved in different deals. So why I was even there, I don't know, but I love the Grand Prairie Women's Club because I believe it takes a village to raise our children, and that's kind of the village that raised me because those are my teachers and principals and people that know you, and I think it's wonderful that they knew Jeff at 17 or 18, and I probably wasn't the most shiniest example of students, but they let me be me, and they let me grow up. And today, you know, after this auction, there's 5 or 6 of my former teachers here, and for them to come up and say they're proud of me, it's really good. So we're at the deal. Their auctioneer didn't show up, and Barbara Kerr comes up to me and says, "Hey Jeff, our auctioneer's not here. We need you to be the auctioneer." And I said, "Well, I'm not an auctioneer." And Barbara Kerr says, "You're the biggest loudmouth I know. How hard can it be?" That's Barbara, right? And I said, "Okay, I'll give it a whirl." And I got up and I did it, and I just did whatever and made people laugh and had a good time. And that was it. And about 2 weeks later, somebody called and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to be our auctioneer." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm not an auctioneer."
Whoa.
Yeah. And so they said, "Come do it." And I said, "All right." And so I started doing like maybe 4 auctions a year. And literally, I remember people calling me on a Tuesday night and saying, "Hey, can you come do our auction Saturday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine. If it'll help," because it was always charity events, pack deals.
Because at the time, weren't you about to have a kid in college?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, and it was just so I just did it, and then it kind of got to where I was doing like 1 a month, and it was getting a little overwhelming. And Melanie and I, we do a lot of praying on our patio, and we're sitting out on our patio, and said, you know, this is now starting to take time and to do some things. And we said, yeah, but we're working with charity. So we just started using it as our date night because it's always a gala and you dress up and you meet local celebrities or whatnot. And we just said it'll be our date night. So we did it as date night for a long time.
And were you only doing Grand Prairie or were you doing around?
I was just, you know, because when you do one auction, it leads to 2 or 3 more because there's always somebody there. If you do a good job, there's always somebody saying, "Hey, we
there's
want
at
you
least
to come
5 other directors of some nonprofit that's there that's like, wait a second.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so then we started, you know, then it starts getting more and more. Now I'm maybe doing 20 or something, and we get back on the patio and we say, "Hey, you know, this is getting to be too much now." And we tried to date night it, and that's interfering with the family. And we just said, okay, well, we're going to have to start charging. And the only reason we wanted to charge was so that people wouldn't use me.
To filter.
We didn't want the money. We just wanted people to say, "Oh, well, never mind." And
so you didn't have to be the bad guy.
Right, exactly. Oh, well, so we decided that I would continue to do auctions for whoever I've done them for. But when new groups called, I was just going to say I'm full. The very next day, a big church out in Cedar Hill that has a K through 12 school that I've never met in my life, they just called and said, "Hey, we've heard about you, and would you please come do our auction?" I said, "All right, God, we just had a conversation last night that we're not going to do this anymore. Now you got a church." So I told them I'd do it. And they had hired a consultant who does this on a national basis, and the guy does like 250 auctions a year. And he was just a godly man, and he was there, and we were visiting, and I told him, I said, "I would love your critique on all of this." And he said, "Yeah, sure." And I'm sure he expected me to get up and kind of fail. And I got up and I did it. And it was one of those auctions where the energy was right, and the people gave me a standing ovation. And when I got back to the table to the guy that does it professionally, he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're the best I've ever heard. You got to start doing this professionally." And I said, "Hey, listen, man, I'm not criticizing how you make your living, but I just don't know how you charge churches and charities." And he said something that set me free. He said, "Jeff," he said, "I'm using my kingdom gifts to get money out of the secular world into the kingdom world." And I said, "Amen, brother, because I'm going to start charging now."
Perspective.
So now I'm going to charge, but I'm really only charging so that they'll say, "Never mind." In this hospital, this big hospital out in East Texas, that I'd done their auctions for years, for like 3 years. I would drive 3 hours out to their event, do their event, not charge a dime. They called and said, "Hey, we're ready to book you." And I hem-hawed around, and I said, "Oh, man, and they go, "Well, what?" And I said, "Well, I'm charging now." And they said, "How much?" And I think back then it was like $1,000. And I said, $1,000? And God just shined through, because they said the greatest thing literally they could have said. They said, "That is fine with us, Jeff. We've been taking advantage of you for years."
I was going to say, I bet they felt like they'd gotten a really good gift for a while.
And so that just set me free. And so we talked to the kids, and we said, "Hey, Daddy's going to start charging now. So if somebody needs me, I have to go. Maybe I have to miss a dance recital." And the kids were like, and we made a deal. It's always going to be family fun money, whether it's buying four-wheelers or going on vacations. And so we kept it family oriented, and it just started growing and growing and growing, and more from there. So I kept going up and up and up and on the price, trying to keep people, to say no, and people just kept paying the price.
Because at this time you were charging, but you were still keeping Grand Prairie.
Grand Prairie to this day is all free. Thank you for saying that. I don't. I'd always done Grand Prairie. When I started charging, I originally said I'll do Grand Prairie for half price, and that's Children First and Lifeline and pretty much anybody in Grand Prairie. There's 3 or 4 Grand Prairie United charities, and they gladly wrote me a check, and I'm gonna tell you, I cashed the check and I spent the money, but it just didn't set well with me. I just said, "Man, I'm a son of Grand Prairie," and so I just decided I'm just going to do the Grand Prairie charities for free. And then especially
that's kind of your service in a different way.
That's my service. That's me giving back to my community, which is really how all this got started.
Right.
And the cool thing about the auctions is it blew up, and now I'm doing 60 or so a year, and I'm charging a lot more than $1,000, and it's been a real financial blessing to our family. And I've along the way went and became a licensed auctioneer, because when you start charging, you got to get licensed and do a lot of different things and continuing education. But I was sitting on my patio one day, and this is the greatest part of the story. And I was out there by myself, and Jenna, just as plain as you and I are sitting here right now, Jesus sat down beside me. I've told this story 20 times, but I get emotional every time. But he sat down right beside me, and he said, "Hey, man," because Jesus and I have a casual conversation. If you need to put a 3-piece suit on to go to your father's house, I appreciate that. But I can go to my father's house in shorts and flip-flops. And Jesus said, "Hey, man, you see what I did?" And I said, "No, I don't know." And Jesus said, "I took the worst thing about you, which was my tongue, and made it the greatest thing about you. And along the way, we've raised millions of dollars for people that need it." And when I say my tongue was the worst thing about me, when I was growing up, and people that know me from when I was growing up and at South Grand Prairie, I was the student body president. I was still already in leadership roles, but I can look back now and see how much I led people in the wrong direction. And my tongue was very, very, very sharp. You know, the Bible says the tongue's the biggest muscle in your body, and it could do more damage than anything.
That's right.
And I had a sharp tongue, and I would make people laugh at you so that you wouldn't be laughing at me. And I just did tremendous damage with my tongue through humor, not knowing. And now, through these auctions, I use the same humor, that God gave me, and now Jesus has refined to where I have some clients, and I try to put it on a business card, but some of my clients call me an auction-tainer, because you see me do it. It's as much as a stand-up comedy routine as it is an auction.
Yep.
So I'm making people laugh, but he took my tongue and took my personality that he gave me that I had misused on my own. I came, right here at South Park Baptist Church, just right next door to what was Jackson at the time, but now it's the South 9th Grade Center. That's where I was baptized in the 7th grade, and I know I had a relationship with Christ, but I wasn't on a walk.
Right.
Through. Once I got to high school, the devil said, let me show you some of these fun things over here. And then when I got to college, the devil said, boy, I really got some things I want to show you. And luckily for me, I still had Melanie in my life, and that kept me grounded. But my tongue did a lot of damage. And so now, when Jesus said, you see what I did? And even then I said, no, Lord, I don't. And then when he told me, I went, oh, wow, because literally every time right before I walk on stage and I go back somewhere and I do it privately, I always pray, Lord, can I have the gift one more time? Because I have no idea how spiritual gifts work, but I know for certain that me being able to do these auctions is a spiritual gift. I don't know how they work, but if they work, that would one of these days, if I walk up on stage and I can't say a word, if I freeze up and I can't auction anymore, I'm just going to say thank you, Lord, for the times that you gave me, and I'm not going to regret. I'm just going to be thankful for what he had. And as soon as I get off the stage, I say a prayer of thanks. And, to this day, there's so much turmoil in our world, and whether you watch CNN or whether you watch Fox, if you're brave enough to ask people, we're all the same. And, and for me, I get to work with so many charities and whether it's Ronald McDonald House or Make-A-Wish, because now God continues to bless my auctioneering business to where I'm doing big, giant national groups. And I remember... You
just did the Cattle Barons auction.
Yeah, I did the Cattle Barons Ball for the American Cancer Society. And, doing auctions that were going over $1 million for. And I'll tell you, boy, if you want to see a 6'4", 300-pound guy cry, come out to the Ronald McDonald House and the Make-A-Wish auctions, because I can't get through them.
From my episode with GPISD Deputy Superintendent of Student Services, Dr. Vern Alexander. So after you graduated college, then where did you go?
I was drafted into the military. It was during the Vietnam War.
Oh my gosh.
And I was stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I stayed there until I received my orders for Vietnam. Yes. And I served in Vietnam for a year. And I'm going to say, I enjoyed my assignment. I was I always say I was the right-hand man of the battalion commander. He was a lieutenant colonel, and he and I had an excellent relationship. I was the only person in the battalion that could type a letter without making a single mistake. So he wanted me to be in the office with him so I could take care of his communication during that particular time. I did not have to be on guard duty out, but I volunteered to go out anyway, which is...
Isn't it funny how our skill sets sometimes can come in really handy for different reasons?
It certainly did. I never realized when I was taking typing in high school. I went to Dalworth High School, and I never thought that I would be using that skill in a war zone.
No, not at
Yes.
all. I wouldn't even guess that would be something, but it makes sense why it would be nice to know how to do it.
It was nice. I was very fortunate. I received the Vietnamese Service Medal, the Army Accommodation, and the Bronze Star while I was in so
I just want to comment that among the history that I knew Dr. Alexander had and could share with us, none of it included a military career.
Me neither. I did not know that.
Is that right?
For
Yes,
sharing that.
definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
So after you got out of there, where did you go from that point?
I came home, and I would say the veterans from Vietnam was not welcomed home and received very well in the public. And unfortunately, it was very difficult for a lot of us returning veterans to find employment. And so with the GI Bill, I decided to go back to college. So I went to North Texas State University and majored in history again and political science. And I received my master's degree from there in I believe it was, what was it? I believe it was 1976 that I received my bachelor's degree. Again, I had an outstanding professor. His major interest was Southern history, and so I learned a great deal under his leadership, and enjoyed that experience as well.
Wow.
I often say that my 2 years in Vietnam and my 2 years in the military was just as valuable as my 4 years of graduate work.
I was going to ask you because I would imagine you seem like the type of person that takes all of your experiences internally to figure out how you're going to use it. So I would imagine that anywhere you're going to be one of those type of people that finds value in how to use it in your regular life.
Yes, I think that all of my experiences have helped me to be a good person. Okay, and I think that was always the goal, is to try to be a better person. I told my wife even this year, I said, honey, my New Year's resolution is to be a better person. Okay, so I think it's always good to work on self-improvement.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, when I did my dissertation, I included a chapter about Vietnam, because I had promised my fellow soldiers that I would do that, and I made it a part of my dissertation for my master's degree.
From my episode with Tammy Chan with the Grand Prairie Homeless Outreach Organization.
We have a different model. We'll tap into housing first when appropriate, but our model is called community first. And what that says is we're never going to be able to put in affordable housing for homeless if our community doesn't understand homelessness.
Right.
If they're rejected,
Exactly.
it's going to be not in my backyard, baby.
Right.
You're not building a halfway house or
Yes.
affordable housing for the homeless here. They're criminals.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Community First initiative, our spin on it is, let's introduce the community to our homeless, and let's tap into that belief community, the faith-based community who's called to serve them. Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me.
Absolutely.
And so how do we introduce the homeless to the community in a safe way so that it's meaningful and does what we need to? Well, we've got a need. Maybe the community can help meet that need, and that's food, hunger.
Right.
Hunger's our top issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, well, we need the community's help to feed the homeless. So why don't we just make that the opportunity? This is something we didn't think of. It just happened. I feel like the Holy Spirit kind of pulled it together. But basically, I put out on Facebook that food is our number one issue, and if anybody has any coupons or access. And I got a contact from a woman from Colleyville who's from India. Her name is Harveen Kaur. She's one of the followers. And she said, in India we have millions of hungry people. A lot are homeless. Here's what they've started in India that's making an impact. They have young business people who are forming clubs called Robin Hood Army Clubs. And the thought is take from the rich and give to the poor.
Mm-hmm.
They're not taking, they're offering. And so they form a club and they adopt a neighborhood and they get together and cook and have fellowship, and then they take the food to the neighborhood.
Wow.
And they've been doing this for several years, and what they found is they fell in love with the neighborhood people.
Right.
So it's evolved to, wow, this neighborhood has 100 people, and while the moms are waiting, the kids are, let's do a little program for the kids and keep them busy. And there's some healthcare issues. So they've grown. Some do straight food, some do more. And she said, why don't you see if you can get some Robin Hood Army teams launched with young adults or seniors or whatever. I'm like, man, that's kind of like a spin on Wheels.
Right.
So we approached Meals on Wheels.
Okay.
We thought, let's try that first. And Meals on Wheels was like perplexed by our request, because how do you deliver to someone who doesn't have an address?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So that did not work. And so we continued with the Robin Hood Army idea and started posting it, and we started getting a few core people who said, well, let me try a lasagna, and they got in the car with me and they went around and they met our people, and they're like, homelessness is not what I thought.
Right.
Homeless people in Grand Prairie are sweet, most of them. They're trapped. They need our help. What else can I do? Oh, I brought baby clothes for her. It's just God connecting people.
It's creating a sense of empathy, and that's what you have to have, is you have got to start getting empathy awareness of understanding what a person has gone through in their life. And I would imagine I've seen this in action, because one of the reasons I decided to be here at First Baptist is because I know people like Debbie Johnston, and people like that have made it a point to try to be a part of this food train, if you will. I don't know what else to call it, where they get food together and they go deliver it. And but I would imagine that you kind of mentioned something earlier about homeless people walking on the street and being aware that they don't want to get in other people's way. So I would imagine that when you can create a sense of community where they see that the community wants to help them, do you feel like, because I can imagine it would be so isolating to be in a homeless situation, do you feel like just the face-to-face interaction between that just kind of creates a sense of, we care about you personally, like it maybe it kind of brings those walls down or something?
Absolutely. That's what's happening is, as our community gets to know their names,
right,
and their stories and cares.
From an episode with Dr. Rhonda Brown Crowder. You're very involved in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always like that, or did that kind of happen?
I think it kind of happened gradually over the years, and it wasn't so much that I set out to say I want to be involved in the community, but as Caleb has gotten older, I've had to become more involved, because I want to do everything I can to help to, as I said, to make life better for my son and to best prepare him for this world. And then I don't also advocate for him, but I also advocate for our special needs community. So that means, being available for meetings at the Ed Center with the special ed department, and being that parent that they can call and say, hey, can you speak at the school board, because we want to get this new facility for our kids, and we need a parent to go and speak from a parental perspective. So I'm that person. Or being involved with the Playground Project and doing those countless hours of volunteer time, so that we can help to raise the money that we need to be able to get this new park that we just have recently opened and continue to build it out. So it's really more of a, I'm very service-minded. I have a ministry of helps. It's just a natural thing for me to want to help. So it's actually a good combination of being able to help, and then also, I also like to work. I can't go somewhere and not do something. So it's like, okay, I'm like, okay, here, I'm going to volunteer, and I sign up for all, things, but the end goal is to make things better for Caleb, to make things better for our community, to make things better, special needs community, and also for our city, and everything.
Yeah.
I just can't sit back and not do anything. I have to do something to make a difference.
Yeah.
It's just ingrained in me to be able to do that, you know?
You are probably, and I have a lot of friends on Facebook, you are probably one of the most active people when it comes to taking advantage of things that the city has to offer. Like, for example, we just went through, was it for Christmas that y'all went to the planetarium for South?
Yes.
And I said, I didn't even know that they did that.
Yes.
But you'll do stuff like that all the time. And I'm like when Caleb got to be chief for a day, didn't know that they did that.
Yes.
You know, it's just so cool. And so, you know, it's one thing when somebody has to be a part of the city. You know, when I interview the mayor or the city councilman or something, okay, yeah, you got to kind of do that. And yes, you have a civic attitude. Yes, you want to do that, but there's a certain part of you that kind of, it's mandatory.
Right.
When you're a person that's just volunteering, it's, it requires a level of actually wanting to make the world a better place. So one of the things that I wanted you to kind of talk about was, for people that are just normal, everyday people that are not wanting to run for city council and not wanting to be elected, how do you start getting involved? What did you do?
Well, you know, it's funny because I do a lot of volunteering, not just in our city, but, you know, Habitat, and I love Habitat for Humanity and just different things like that, and feeding programs. And I found as I volunteered that a lot of people really want to get involved, but they don't know how to get involved. And a lot of people are intimidated about getting involved because the thought of them going to, even say for Habitat and go do a build or something, to go to this place, there's nobody that they know, and to do something that they've never done, it's too much for them. So I guess for me, I've kind of worked past that point because I do that. But I think that usually, and that's why I like to post a lot of the things that I do like that, because not to brag, but to help people to say, oh my gosh, Dr. Crowder went and did that. And then a lot of times they'll call me and say, hey, I want to go with you the next time. And then they'll go with me, and then once they do it the first time, then they get past that fear, and the next thing you know that they're volunteering. So I think that it's just, you know, if you've got a friend like myself, somebody that does it regularly, that you can maybe do it with the first time, so that you can get past that to do it that way. Or, you know, they have different volunteer organizations that you can sign up with. Sorry, I don't have any off the top of my head, but you know, you can go and sign up for those. And a lot of times it's people that are just like them that have never volunteered before and just want to have a new experience. But I just encourage people to find something, you know, there's meals, there's all kinds of things. If you want to work with the elderly, if you want to work with children, if you want to work with your hands and building, you know, there's tons and tons and tons of things to do. But I think we all have a responsibility to do something, not just to walk around, you know, just sucking up air, if you will, you know, but we all have a responsibility to do something. And yes, we're all busy. And maybe they don't have time to volunteer as much as I do and be as involved as I am, but there's still something, even if it's just one thing that you can commit to doing, and it'll make a difference.
From my episode with Grand Prairie Police Chief Daniel Cessny. So what are you most excited about?
Wow, that's a good question. My very first evaluation here as a police officer, back then we would ask officers, what are your 3 goals? And most of us back then would say something like, learn the penal code better, or I don't know, get on this unit or that unit. One of my very first goals was, become the police chief.
Wow.
At the time, that was incredibly ambitious, and I caught heck from everybody that read that. But I just knew that I wanted to lead this organization. So I'm really excited about the opportunity. Now, having said that, it's really important to understand that the way we work here, while I'm the face of our organization, this is a team sport. And if you wear a gold badge in this building, that means you're a supervisor. Your job is to remove roadblocks from the crime fighters. And they know it. So our philosophy is sort of an inverted triangle, so to speak. You know, in a normal organization, you got the CEO at the top, and then, you know, and work your way down. For us, the bosses are at the bottom, and because we prioritize the work of our crime fighters, because they're the ones that are making it safe for our citizens. So we are looking at everything, and it's exciting to be able to drill down and get rid of any red tape to help facilitate that mission. Our former chief was really good at that too, and I was on his command staff for 3 years. So there's no drastic shift in strategy. I'll just tell you now.
Right.
It'd be crazy to do that because it's working so well. But having said that, being the new guy, it is exciting to have the opportunity to be the face of our department and continue to be a part of a leadership team that is. I'm just telling you, we're the best police department in the country. I know that's ambitious. I know that my friends to the northeast, south, and west are going, yeah. But we're the best. We just are. And that's because our cops are bought in to what's important, and that's the folks.
100%. I talk to people all the time, officers all the time, and they are 100% bought in. They're excited. You know, they're really, really interested in doing something really great for the place where they live. And a lot of them have been here for a very long time. I don't know how many officers graduated from high schools in Grand Prairie.
Sure.
A lot.
We've got a bunch. And you also see that very, very few officers, when they get hired here, leave until they retire. And our retention rate is off the charts.
Yes.
It's because they love being Grand Prairie police officers. I
Yes.
mean, I'm just another example. I didn't realize how blessed I was to get hired here when I first got hired. I just wanted to be a cop, like a lot of the guys do. But you very quickly go from being a cop to being part of a family that we stand shoulder to shoulder when things are great, but also when it's our darkest hour. And, you know, we recently went through that with the loss of Officer A.J. Castaneda, but, you know, we also lost Sergeant Greg Hunter and Officer Lyndon King. And our officers pull together, and we get through that spot because we're a family.
From my episode with Grand Prairie YMCA Executive Director, Susanna Delgado Gray.
Well, and it's important, I think, as parents, so now we're getting into the parent topic, but
Sure, let's go there.
apologize. To apologize.
Don't even get me started.
Sometimes
Yes.
as adults, we don't apologize.
Yes.
And I have to come to my boys sometimes and say, you know, I'm sorry. I lost my cool. Or, you know what, you're right. I was triggered by that, and I took your phone away, and that wasn't fair to you because I didn't give you enough warnings. I have an expectation that I didn't communicate, and so now I'm punishing you by removing your technology. And I'm sorry about that. And to see a look in their eyes of like, wow, you see me as a human. You see me as a person.
Yes.
I've gained more respect. My husband and I have gained more respect from our boys in teaching them that vulnerability, because when they make a mistake, they need to know that they need to own up to it, no matter how it is. And we have to teach that as parents.
Oh, man. And especially with boys. Like, I was watching a documentary. It's called The Mask We Live In. And it's about, it's all kids, but boys especially. You have to give them the words to use to be able to talk about what they're going through. And I was so fortunate. I mean, the divorce was not a great thing in my life, but I was fortunate that I got the counseling out of it because I was able to, number one, understand how I project my own feelings onto my child. And number two, I was able to understand, just like what you said, my child is a human being first. She's God's child first before she's mine.
Yeah.
But she is her own person with her own personality, her own feelings, her own individual likes, dislikes. And she's not an extension of me. She is her own person. And I'm her mother that's guiding her along this journey. But I'm not perfect either. And being able to reflect as a parent and being able to say to your child, listen, this is what happened. Because you know what? The next time that happens to them, they'll be able to understand why. And God, that's tremendous. The power of an apology is very, very important.
And that comes back to full circle when they enter the job force.
Oh, yes.
And, in the business that we're in, it's customer service. I mean, we work with volunteers, we work with members, we work with community people. And if we're not able to apologize and make right, which is what we try to empower our team with, And many of them were like, well, so what do I do, Miss Susanna? I don't know. And I'm like, well, what does your heart tell you to do? My heart tells them to refund the $30 that we dropped. And I said, okay, well, let's do that. They're like, but in their paperwork for that, and I said, when you're going to do the right thing, we find a way.
Yeah.
So if that's what you want to do, if that's what's going to make the customer happy, then refund the $30. Give them the discount. Help them enroll for that class. If you got to put your own phone out and help them navigate that frustrating online system of setting up a login, then let's help them do that.
Right.
Because it's, at the end of the day, it's, I tell my husband, because then I come home and I pull out my laptop and I'm working, and he says, do you work at the office? Like, you come home and you have work all day. And I really started thinking about that. I'm like, God, I do work. I continue to work after dinner and after checking in with the boys and all that. And I realize that I do my heart work at the office, because that's when you're building and talking and relationships. So my heart work happens during the day. And when I go home is when I do my brain work, is when I knock out the deadlines. I write the grant. I, write the email, check all that. That's where the brain work happens, where there aren't a lot of distractions. Because when you're in a people industry, you have to take time to love and nurture people.
From my episode with SGPHS alum Lana Kluge.
Kind of talking about the alumni, we're forming the South Grand Prairie High School Alumni Association, and I've said this before. I have no clue why we don't have one already. But,
I agree.
But we're forming that, and as someone that helped organize your 20th reunion, why do you feel like it's important for people to still go to reunions and be a part of all these things, after they graduate from their high school?
Well, I think it's super important. I mean, we grew up with these people, and, we did life with them for all these years. And I think it's important to stay connected. And I think we were very lucky to grow up in a city and a school that is so diverse, that has made the people that we are today. I know everybody says this about their class, but I truly believe that, we have one of the best classes, and, we all come from different backgrounds, different social statuses, different religions and ethnicities. But when we all come together under one room, we're all equals, and we're all friends, and we truly care about each other. And I think it's important to stay connected with your alumni.
I agree. And one of the things, because I planned my 20th reunion as well, because I graduated in 98. And I would agree that, yes, during our time together in our high school, we had the best, we had a great experience growing, in high school.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. What I told a lot of people to come, and everybody's attitude is, I'm the people that I'm friends with, or that I was friends with back then, I'm friends with now. I don't need to see everybody else. And I always want to remind people that we're not 18 years old anymore. Like, we're in our 30s and 40s now. And especially when it's your 20th reunion. And there's a great number of people that you might not have ever had the privilege to know, that now you're in a totally different phase of life, and now you can be friends on a different level. So, did you find it hard to organize y'all's reunion at all?
Every event comes with its challenges, but luckily we had the most incredible committee of 7 people that each pulled their strengths and their weight to make it the best reunion that we could. And we all worked so well together. And we were truly sad when it was over, because we had so much fun putting it together.
Yeah, we had a great time too. So one of the things I'm noticing as kind of starting this alumni association, and since we have Grand Prairie listeners, that now we have we have more than that. We have the 2 main high schools, Fine Arts Academy, DeBisky. We have, I think, the girls and boys school both just had graduating classes. So now we have several schools that are producing graduates from Grand Prairie. And one of the things that I want for these kids to know when they're graduating is that the second you graduate, you're an alumni, and you get to be a part of that with your school. And so it's the attitude of staying connected and being a part of what was going on. But one of the things that I find that people are asking me tons of is,
how do you even start planning something like that? And where do you what do we even do? And so I know that there's some of us that have an event planning type mentality that we can just kind of start and not, with no ideas. But like, what were some of the ways that you got your reunion started, and how did y'all start making the plans for it?
Well, we came together and met about a year in advance, and event planning is kind of in my blood because I've done it for 16 years prior to being a travel agent, and I still do event planning. I work with My Event Central, who is also owned by a Grand Prairie alumni.
Really?
Tina Love, y'all might know her.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it kind of comes naturally to me, and so we met and we went over some ideas for venues, and we kind of got a head count from our 10-year reunion and kind of based our interest off of who might want to come to our 20 to put together a rough budget. And that's the scariest part, is putting together a budget, because you have no idea how many people are actually going to come. And
amen, sister.
Oh yeah, so
that is hard.
It's so scary, and we emphasized so much to our class how important it was to help us out by purchasing tickets as early as possible, so that we could pay our deposits and get a rough estimate of if we need to back off the contract a little bit, or if we can increase it and make it more awesome. So there's just so much that goes into it that I don't think people fully understand. And until the night of, when they see it all. And and I saw the pictures from yours as well, and it's amazing how it comes together, and
totally
it's 100% worth it at the end of the day.
From my episode with the tickets, Steve Pryor.
I worked with a school board member prior to knowing you, where she would help me do like estate sales, and there would be things that happen, like, I don't know, if a teacher passed away or something like that, where it was kind of like a something that would just pop up. She'd be on the phone all day long, and it kind of gave me insight into what y'all's life is like whenever you are an elected official. And I think school board, it's because I've known city council members, and it's not like that for them nearly as much as it's like that for people that are on school board, which is one of the reasons why, when people say, well, somebody just needs to run against them, I'm like, do you want to do it? Because it's not the easiest thing to do.
Well, I'll tell you where I think the real difference between city council and school board comes in. City council, for the most part, you're dealing with, not the right word, but corporate policies. You're talking about zoning issues. You're talking about code enforcement. You're talking about police and how the police department works, and is it going to be community policing? Is it going to be, are we going to try and build trust, or are we going to go in and guns blazing? And it's more kind of high level, policy based stuff. When it gets to the school board, it's my child has an issue with this teacher. My child, is failing. My child got suspended, and I don't think it's fair. So much of it is, it involves that sentence, my child.
Right.
And that's where, that's where the difference is. It's very personal.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, Dr. Hull and I would kind of go back and forth on a couple of different things. But one of the things is that, hey, this parent reached out to me. She says she's reached out to the administration, and hadn't heard back. And it was like, and we talk about like customer service response times. And it was like, okay, for that principal calling, Mr. Pryor back might be, one of 10 parents that they need to call back, and that they'll get to, and they're out of the school this day for a meeting, and they've got, this conference that day. They might take a couple of days to get back to somebody. Well, that person, that's consuming their life at that point.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, I understand that, and we had this problem when we were at Reagan. Myself and another parent both called the principal about the same time for a similar issue. I got a call back that day. They heard back 2 days later.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, okay, is he calling me back because he knows I'm on the school board? But he's calling my friend back 2 days later because he knows that he can, you know, he didn't think that was as important a phone call. It was both about the same basic thing. We both wanted, you know, some information.
Right.
I got it a lot quicker. And it's just like, okay, at that moment, this guy's question, that was consuming his life. He needed to know this before he could whatever.
Right.
And not getting it drives people crazy.
Yeah, and it's not just my child, it's also my money. And, you know, that's a big part of it. You know, I know that city council controls certain parts of property taxes and stuff, but I mean, definitely school board is responsible. I mean, when it comes to people's money, the amount of money they pay on their mortgage payment, you know, how it affects their life, and then a child, it's a lot more personal. And, you know, it's when I saw how much she'd be on the phone. And then the other thing too is I've always been fortunate enough to have people that I've had relationships with, like friendships with, like you and other people, where I'm like, if they're talking to me for this long, how many other people are they talking to in their day for this long, and having conversations all the time? And it's a huge sacrifice to do that and to be an elected official, you know, even on a city level. So like we don't.
But all right, I'll tell you, it's, you know, there are a lot of times where, okay, the headache, the hassle, the, you know, the pain in the neck factor is like, what am I doing this for?
Right.
And then every May, I'm up on stage at Verizon, and I'm seeing kids come across the stage, and seeing the, you know, the sheer joy on their face of, oh my God, I actually made it. You know, I graduated. Because sometimes, you know, some of them you know they're going to graduate. You know those, you know, that top 10%, they don't have any issues. But sometimes those kids from crosswinds, that they're the ones that, oh man, I managed to gut through it, you know, with a little help and a lot of tutoring. I managed to get my high school diploma, and just, you know, the look of joy, the look of exhilaration that they're a high school graduate. It's, you know, it makes
all the other stuff easier to
It makes
bear.
those phone calls easier to take when you kind of have that balance of people, I love this school, I love I love this teacher, I love, you know, this program.
From an episode with retired Parks and Recreation Director Rick Harold.
The thing about it is this town has had a lot of momentum in the Parks and Rec department for a long time. I mean, it's been growing and growing and growing. And so to kind of retire at that point, but you still live here. You still live in town.
I sure do.
Yep. And so do you still you get to take advantage of the facilities that you work so hard to do?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to give some advice.
Okay.
Because I think this can happen in life.
And I will gladly listen.
I was in no way wanting to retire when I retired. No way. I expected to be late 60s to retire. But I did something that I want to tell people to do, to consider, and that is not falling too much in love in what your profession is. Because I was not a user of facilities. I was a part of a team who created facilities. And with that, you know, my health was poor. My weight was way too much. And I kept paying personal toll because I loved it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it was 7 days a week. I didn't mind it was evenings. I just loved it. But I loved it a little too much from that standpoint, from a holistic life standpoint. So I gave a lot of stuff up for that. That's why J-Lo at the Super Bowl was telling her, I saw a little thing at her and Alex Rodriguez, and J-Lo goes, well, it's our act too. And I said, oh, I like that. That doesn't mean I'm going to go into some career doing something, but it just means changing those things. So your dad and I have never played golf before because my knees have been shot for years. Now, I love to tell you my knees got shot playing football, or playing baseball or playing basketball, which I really loved. They didn't. They got wore out from carrying another 100 pounds I shouldn't have been carrying. So it's kind of a dichotomy. And the one person who's my professional mentor, if you will, is Dr. John Crompton at Texas A&M University. He is the world's leading expert on parks and recreation. And we became friends a long time ago. Here I'm a North Texas kid, and he's an Aggie. But he had heard me do a presentation. He said, Rick, that was a wonderful presentation. But one thing I want to tell you, he says, you're an embarrassment to the profession. And a lot of people would never, ever tell you that. But it stuck with me. We're great friends today. Crossing our fingers, I'll be teaching at A&M come fall of 2020. Wow. So North Texas has kind of changed their thing to professional sports management, which I think is a mistake, but I don't think they care if Rick thinks it's a mistake. But anyway, so make sure you have a holistic lifestyle to do all the things. So I love to go out and say, one of the great things that I don't think people do is show outcomes, and I think us being the staff and the park board, we made a concentrated effort to show legitimate, documented outcomes. And we have a series of films I'm really, really proud of, and one of those is the Summit Success Stories, because we knew that the Summit was going to touch lives. We didn't know how many lives in many different areas. It's just not physically, it's emotionally and psychologically, it's even spiritually. So we have those people on tape, what it's done to them. And that's why I'm so pumped about the profession and what we can do and play a role in the town.
From my episode with Bonnie Cockrum with the Grand Prairie Historical Organization. Digitizing documents, that's not what that is. No. Because if you've ever read a newspaper that was copied on a photocopier, there are words missing. You can't read all the way through. If someone didn't lay them down flat, there's a crease in the middle. So digitizing documents is a professional process for a reason, because you have to get every single part of that document into the detail. And when you have the right lighting and the right camera equipment, you can do that kind of stuff. The other thing too is, I want you at home as a project to go try to take a picture of a pamphlet. Just find a pamphlet in your house. Find something that has 10 pieces of paper on it. And I want you to take a picture of each one of those pages and see how long it takes you to get it correct. And understand how long it takes to digitize documents correctly. And when you have the right setup, it certainly makes it easier. But when there's only one person doing it, it can be a very painstaking process. So when she says she needs more people to help, that's the kind of stuff. It's very tedious, but it is so important. And it is so important to do it the correct way with the correct equipment, because that's how historical documents get done properly. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yes. I'll tell you the tediousness of one thing that was so amazing. This was a project by one of our members, Larry Wheat, that he took on, and remembering that we have volunteers come in, and they're different volunteers, and so people just rotate. For instance, I would come in and whatever was ready to do, whether it was a file folder of documents or a scrapbook from some organization, that's what I would do that day. It was different every time. But we had a special area that was Larry's area, and he was digitizing the Deckman Diary. Now, Alexander McCrae Deckman, some of your
I did an episode on it.
Okay,
yep.
They may or may not know. Bought the first plot of land, and his little town was named Deckman, and that's right down in the middle of Grand Prairie where that 239.5 acres was. This handwritten diary was yellowed, old, and crumbling.
Mm-hmm.
There were pieces loose. Now, granted, it was in pretty good shape considering the age, which was over 100 years. Roughly, I can't remember exact date it was written, but anyway, Larry took tweezers and moved little bits of paper back together. Now, we don't use Scotch tape, and we don't glue. We don't like Post-it notes, and we don't like ballpoint pens because they damage important documents. So when we digitize, if we have to make notes, it's with a pencil or it's on a sheet of paper that gets digitized along with the item. And so anyway, Larry painstakingly digitized every page, and some of the words had been distorted from age, faded a little. There were handwritten notes in the margin from a descendant, and so he worked on this a very long time.
Wow.
Thankfully, not all of our documents are like that. But then I say, I wish we had more documents like that.
Right.
Because that's what we're here for.
Right.
So now we have the Deckman Diary digitized that can be looked at and read so much more easily on a screen.
Right.
And it's preserved.
From an episode with Texas Roadhouse owner Mike Medrano.
The trek to get this guy was about 4 years. It took about 4 years to actually, from the nut to the tree. It was really about 4 years.
Well, so one of the things I want to go back to is because first of all, Texas Roadhouse was one of the first real restaurants that Grand Prairie had when it was opened back in 1998. So we had a Chili's in 1996, and that was the big time. We thought we had hit the big time. So when Roadhouse came, there was really nothing over here. I mean, over at Great Southwest and I-20, we had a gas station, I think, and a McDonald's, but there wasn't any of this stuff.
No.
So when they came over, it was really exciting. Well, it was also not the first restaurant in Texas Roadhouse in Texas.
Right.
I mean, it was not the first Texas Roadhouse, even though it was the first Roadhouse in Texas.
Right.
So it was like 26th, right? So when and Texas Roadhouse started in malls. Like some of the first ones were actually in a mall. So when they built the Grand Prairie location, after everything progressed and we realized the kind of people that come in, the groups, the sizes, how they kind of sit and all that stuff, there were some changes that were made to the restaurants after that.
Right.
And so y'all have adapted as much as you can in that restaurant. Because when we were open, you couldn't accommodate large parties hardly at all.
Right.
There was hardly any waiting space. There was no to-go area because that wasn't even a thing at the time, really.
Right.
And so over time, y'all tried to adapt it. But since the moment that restaurant opened, the parking has been a problem ever since the day we opened that store, because this place was as busy as could be. And so I knew when I heard that y'all were getting a new restaurant, I was so excited because you need one.
Right.
This restaurant is still so crazy busy. So you started 4 years ago, and so did you present the idea and then Roadhouse had to agree? How did that work?
Yeah, well, the thing is that the old location was a leasehold. Okay, we didn't own the property. We owned the building, but we didn't own the property. So if you own the building, don't own the property, you don't own much of nothing except for what's inside.
Right.
Well, here, we bought the property.
Oh,
so
great.
we own the property, we own the building, this is our guy, So, when I say this is my restaurant, truly, this is my restaurant. Over there, this was my building.
Right.
Over here, this is my house. This is our house. This is Texas Roadhouse's house. You want to know the truth? This is Grand Prairie's house. Because honestly, without the backing and support of not only the citizens of Grand Prairie, but also the city leadership.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about that a little bit later on. But over there, like you mentioned, the parking was always an issue. Large parties is always an issue. Over here, people are always telling me, Mike, being that busy is a great problem to have, but it's still a problem.
Yeah.
So being over here, we have 80 more parking spaces, which is really close to 100. But you know what? Last night we were already, people are like rolling around the parking lot. And I hate to say that because people are going, oh well, then I just won't go. But my opinion is we could have an additional 200 parking spaces and we'd still fill it up. And you know, we went on a little bit of a wait last night, even though the weather was terrible.
Yeah.
You know, that's the show of support from
On a
the
Wednesday.
city of Grand Prairie. Yeah, on a Wednesday. Just beat the dog stuffings out of every other restaurant, you know, in our market because everybody else was down because of the weather. You know, last night we were 29% up in sales from last year.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's with the weather the way it was. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, you know, but you know, I mean, like you said, you know, we had to do this. You know, it has been a 4-year journey. You know, how it started was, you know, really just talking to Jerry, you know, about, man, we got to go, you know, and he asked something about, you know, the 161 thing, because 161 at that point in time wasn't complete, and you know, they had talked about the Cedar leadership, the economic development people had talked about, you know, hey, Mike, move to 161. But I'm real loyal, you know me. I mean, I'm loyal to the end, and I was loyal to this part of town, and I was loyal to this street, and I was loyal to my partners, the you know, restaurants and businesses around me. You know, so I'm not going anywhere. You know, this is home. You know, I want that spot down there, and I remember telling Jerry and driving with him and going, this is the spot that I want. You know, and we're within 100 yards of what, you know, I said I wanted.
Right.
You know. And, you know, so I showed Jerry, and Jerry went to real estate, and real estate's like, you know, yeah, well, who's the owner? Who knew? I didn't know, you know. So I got them in touch with, I don't remember who the economic development, Bob O'Neill was the economic development guy at the time, and he gave them the name and whatever, and the price was too high and all the stuff, and kind of almost a year lapsed, and I remember talking to Steve Dye, the ex-police chief, Steve Dye, and telling him, you know, yeah, we're looking to move, you know, and at that time we were looking at a property in Arlington off of 30, and I told him this, you know, and he's like, oh, you can't leave the city, you know, oh, Mike, you can't leave the city, and I remember the look on his face, and I remember the sincerity in his voice, can't leave the city. And I'm like, but we're landlocked, man, you know. And he's like, what could keep you in the city? Steve Dye, police chief, you know. And I'm like, we're looking at a spot over there, kind of that's too high. I said, if you can get them to kind of come down on their price, you know. And he's like, let me see what I can do.
Because the interesting part about it is, like, this place, this area exploded, and it built all the way up into, what was that hotel? I think it's that hotel or that Care Now. And then that's it for like years. I mean, this land has been sitting here for years with nobody doing anything with it. So yeah.
You know, I remember when Sarah Jane, you know, stopped at Beto's.
Yeah.
You know, Albert and the Sanchez family's, you know, restaurant, and you know, for the longest time. You know? And you know, I remember we would park in the field.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Even before Beto's was there. I mean, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Everybody parks in the field.
Yeah.
You know?
Actually, when they built Beto's, I remember thinking, where's everybody going to park now? Because we were trying to park at Taco Bueno. They weren't having that.
Oh, they
hated it, with good reason. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, it's their property.
You know? And so then we're parking on the street. I mean, it's crazy. So Chief Dye, that's crazy that he...
Yeah. Okay. You talk about parking in the street. Well, then, once they expanded Sarah Jane Parkway, we couldn't park in the street anymore. So we're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You
totally
know?
Forgot that dead end right there.
So I remember, you know, sending an email, I think it was, to the police chief or, you know, Steve Dye, or maybe I called him, I don't really remember, and I'm like, hey man, I need this. You know, I need to be able to park in my street. You know, and they made, I don't remember what it's called, it's some kind of exception where, you know, on those days they would cover the no parking sign so we could park in the street.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, come on, man. What city does that?
From an episode with Beto's owner, Albert Sanchez.
There are pros and cons to every pathway that you take, right? So there's a pro for the kind of wing it, we'll see how it goes, carefree, 19-year-old, young Albert. But in the long haul, the structure, the systems, the planning, the feasibility studies, in the long run, that's going to pay tenfold in benefits than the winging it. So I look back, and my dad would always tell me, we were running and gunning, and the sales were there. I mean, the sales were there, and I'm 24, 25 at the time, and my dad would bring something up to me, like, this is not right. This is not good at the store. And I would just say, hey, and I would throw out a number. And it was a big number. And to me, that was the answer, Sales don't lie. And you say it out of arrogance. You say it out of cockiness. You say it out of a lack of experience. And probably the biggest thing, you say it out of immaturity. That sales don't lie. They don't lie. But what you come to find out really fast is they will tell the truth. So all the things that you're doing wrong might not show up right then and there.
Right.
But the guests that you had on a weekly basis might have had a bad experience, and now it's once every 2 weeks.
Right.
And then you mess up on them again. Okay, maybe once every 6 weeks, then give me one more chance. You mess up again, you'll never see them again.
Right.
And I feel like I sacrificed what built us for revenue, for growth. You see it all the time. You hear about it. I mean, you don't need to be a finance major to hear about whatever store crumbled under their own success.
Right.
Because it's the same thing. And I'm not saying we're crumbling, but we grew too fast without the infrastructure.
Right.
Especially there was no cloud-based systems. I mean, we didn't even have plastic gift cards at the time. This is how long ago. We were still doing numbered paper gift certificates. And if you don't have the infrastructure in place to have checks and balances, it's a lot easier now. Everything's cloud-based, everything's digital. You can have security cameras, you can have Google Drive, you got POS. But back then you didn't have that. You needed people, literally, you needed an audit to go, like, hey, and I was so cheap, and I thought I was 20 foot tall. Why do I need to spend X amount of money on a GM? I'll be GM.
Right.
You do need a GM.
Yes.
You do need an area supervisor. But when you're like, no, I can do it. No, you can't.
From my episode with Mike Gear, manager of the Aransas County Airport in Rockport, Texas.
So going back to June of 17, and we all got together as a county and as a local area, really, and decided how we would handle a hurricane if it happened. We just kind of thought, we're never going to need it. It's going to be a 1 in a million shot if we ever get a hurricane. And then all of a sudden you have when
was the last time you'd had one?
I think it was in the 70s. Gotcha. The last time they'd had Celia or something, I think, down here, or Carla. Anyway, there hadn't been anything knocked down by a hurricane here in a lot of years.
Right.
In fact, I think the last hurricane that affected this area actually hit Corpus, and Rockport was on the high water side, so there was some flooding. And then 100 years ago, in 1919, there was a leveling hurricane that came through here and schwacked Rockport pretty good. And the people, there are still a few buildings that were around then that are in some old photographs and stuff, and you can see everything around them's underwater. So we would have been in a lot worse shape if we would have been on the high water side of this hurricane. Fortunately, we were just on the high wind side. But nevertheless, so we started in June, and then everybody just kind of put their plans on the back burner. And then all of a sudden we had the tropical depression that was moving across the Yucatan, and we started perking up and paying attention, and National Weather Service started getting involved. We have a guy in Corpus that's a hurricane expert, and the county defers to him for everything as far as warnings and evacuation orders and emergency declarations and everything. So he became a big player at that time. And I think the hurricane hit on a Friday, and that was like Monday or Tuesday that we started watching this depression. And I think that was actually still out in the Atlantic at that time. And some of the models were showing that it could come into the Gulf. Well, then we get in, now fast forward to Wednesday. I'm going to meetings probably 3 times a day at this point. We're having briefings from the National Weather Service on what to expect and how it could be. And now they're starting to kind of put a cone of uncertainty over, basically from Port Mansfield, which is at the tip of Texas, all the way up to Galveston. And then, and at that time, Harvey had just come across and was in the Gulf and was now a tropical depression on its way to becoming a tropical storm. I don't know timelines a lot from there because everything runs together. But I'll tell you this. We know now that it went from a tropical depression to a hurricane in 40 hours. So this is why that number is important, because my plan was a 72-hour plan. So I had a 72-hour plan for a hurricane in the Gulf, not just a tropical depression that came across the Yucatan, but a hurricane coming into the Gulf of Mexico. And that was kind of what the standard was. You make a 72-hour plan. Well, Mike Tyson said one time about one of his opponents, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Right.
So we got punched right in the mouth. So our plan kind of was not really a plan at all. It wasn't anything that I was living by anymore. We were just doing what we could to survive. So it was a lot of things. There were a lot of things that were mitigating factors in, I think, in how we took the hurricane whenever it happened. We probably could have been readier for it, but in reality, you just have to react. And so I had in my list of things that we were going to do, I'll give you a quick example. We have hurricane plexiglass that we were going to put on the airport terminal building. And we put it on the airport terminal building all the way around. And so the way this plexiglass goes on, it's corrugated, but you can see through it. So it looks kind of like sheet metal, but it's clear plastic. And we have a lot of windows on the terminal. And so you take a panel of it. It's about 4 foot, I guess it's about 3 foot wide, and however tall the window is, they're custom cut. And then you put it up onto the window, and then there's these studs that are on channels at the top and the bottom of the window, and you just line the holes up with the panel over those studs, which is basically just a screw. And then you put all of the screws through the holes on the panel, and then you tighten everything down with wing nuts. And under ideal conditions, it's probably not that difficult. I had never done it. I didn't even simulate it, but I gave it a unit of work that I thought it was going to represent on my plan. And so I thought this is going to take one guy about 4 hours to do the whole building, and it ended up taking 2 guys 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
To do it. And so my budget for time was blown out of the water with that. So what did that cost us? Well, it cost us having bodies that could go around the airport and double check hangar doors, double check locks and cane bolts and things like that you really could help shore up some of these buildings, to stow loose items, to figure out a way to anchor portable buildings and equipment and things like that. So we're already kind of behind the gun. And I had 2 people that evacuated. 2 of my crew evacuated, and I wasn't planning on that. They weren't required to stay, but I'd had a verbal commitment from them that they would, and then they left. I'm not saying anything bad about them. Everybody has the right to do what they want. I could have left, but I chose to stay. And that was a decision I made with my wife and my family. But the thing about running out of time is, that was never more evident than the next morning when I woke up and there was basically nothing left. Everything was gone. And I had a huge feeling of guilt for a long time that I should have done more. I should have tried more and planned better and worked harder. And I probably could have secured some doors because, you're hearing now from engineers and people that are coming in and looking at your destruction. Well, the wind obviously breached this door. And when the door breached, you lost the whole building. So what if I had checked that door and made sure that the cane bolts were down or the chains were locked or something, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So, Texas Department of Transportation Aviation Division asked me to give a lessons learned and best practices presentation at one of the conferences that followed the hurricane. And I did. And, going on what information I had at the time, I kind of basically told them what I just told you. What I know now is something completely different, and I don't feel so bad about things anymore. I think a lot of the buildings that we had here were not going to sustain 130 or 40 miles an hour for as many hours as they did.
Right.
The hurricane sat on us for 13 hours. We had 13 hours of hurricane force winds. We had 24 hours of tropical storm force winds. So it's just like anything else that's made out of metal or mortar or brick or stick. You wobble it back and forth enough and it's going to break loose.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what happened. And I'm not saying that, we had inferior structures here. They could have been built to, 120, 130 miles an hour. But, back and forth over time is going to wear something out. It's going to fall down. So I don't feel as bad as I did back then. I feel very fortunate to survive it.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't ever stay for another major hurricane again.
From my episode with GPS alum Robin Brown.
Staying on the World War II thing, everybody goes off to war. My mother morphs from being the funeral home secretary to making ambulance calls, and she didn't sign up for that, but she gets pressed into service because not all the men, but a lot. So my mother and Mrs. Turner, they would make ambulance calls, and my mother got pulled into duty.
See, this is making me want to do a whole nother women part of
Women of Grand Prairie.
Women of Grand Prairie, because we know about Miss Ruthie, but there's a lot of other women that had really.
Well, listen, Ruthie Jackson, a walking icon of Grand Prairie. I'll share this with you. Mrs. Turner, the first female embalmer. She had a younger sister, Gertie Robertson Couch. So Gertie was a civic-minded person, and she married Earl J. Couch, and 1920. There was no. You're gonna like this, I think. There was no library in Grand Prairie. Mrs. Turner's sister, Mrs. Couch, another sister of my grandfather, she would get on the interurban with a friend of hers. They would take empty suitcases to the Grand Prairie. This may be discussed at the Women's Club of Grand Prairie. They would take empty suitcases to the Central Dallas Library, check out books, bring the books back in suitcases to the lean-to shack that was Grand Prairie City Hall in the 1920s. And people learned through word of mouth, no cell phones, that they could come to the little city hall, which was where Lee D's insurance building was, and they could rent out books. And so Gertie Couch and this other lady were literally creating the Grand Prairie library system. The books would be read, they would load them up in the suitcases, take the interurban back to downtown Dallas, check them back in, check out more books, bring more. That's how Grand Prairie's library system began. And when the library celebrated their 100th anniversary, Gertie Couch was still alive. Now, I'm talking about Mrs. Turner's younger sister. Gertie Couch lived to be 105 and a half years old. She was 56 when I was born, and she's still alive when I'm 50. And she died in 2004, and my 15-year-old son was a pallbearer at her funeral. But anyway, literally she founded the Grand Prairie Library System, and on the 100th anniversary of Grand Prairie's library system, they honored her. She was still alive, and she was part of the ceremony. So now I've dragged Minnie V. Turner's baby sister into this because that was significant.
Absolutely.
She also founded the Grand Prairie Study Club.
Okay.
Which was a women's organization.
There was another club that kept coming up in the newspaper, and I can't remember what it was, but I've always, maybe I'll think of it, but there's organizations that we don't have anymore. A lot of organizations that used to be, but we don't have anymore. But this one was something that I was like, what is that? What do they do? But I'll have to think of it.
Well, your mother could help you with. Deb, does the Grand Prairie Study Club still exist?
No.
Okay. No. When she founded that, see, the Women's Club of Grand Prairie didn't come into existence until 1968. Before that, it was the Grand Prairie Study Club, and it was women who would come together, determined to better their community. Well, your mother should have been in that generation because these women were very independent women, and they weren't content to stay in the home. And they did things like found the library. They did things. And
they had their own chapter of the Chamber of Commerce, and they had all the, women were definitely a big part of the history of this town.
Rightfully so.
And I don't know if that's typical, or if it was atypical for the time. But
Oh no. Well, but I looked at Gertie Couch as ahead of her time as far as if something needed to be done, she didn't go ask a man's permission. She just did it.